And it all depends on what value you're dividing by. So let's say we divide by cosine squared. Okay, so if we take our original Pythagorean identity and we divide every individual term by cosine squared, that's going to create a new statement, and that new statement's going to be 1 plus what's sine squared over cosine squared? Sine over cosine is tangent, so it'll be tangent squared theta is equal to, and what is 1 over cosine? Secant squared theta. So this right here is one of the alternate forms. And then from here, depending on what you isolate, if I'm isolating the secant squared, it's here. I can also isolate tan squared is secant squared theta minus 1. And I can also isolate the 1. 1 is equal to secant squared theta minus tan squared theta. So these would be the other forms that kind of derive from that same relationship. Okay, what if we divided everything by the sine squared? Okay, so if we divided everything by sine squared, here we get cosine over sine, which is cotangent squared, plus sine squared over sine squared, which is 1 over sine squared, which is cosecant squared. So here would be one of our other alternate forms. And then again, depending on what we're solving or isolating for, cotangent squared is equal to cosecant squared theta minus 1. And here, if we wanted to isolate the 1, is equal to cosecant squared minus cotangent squared. And so those would be your two alternate forms of that alternate form. And then finally, the last set is the ones that we already looked at, and that is if we just took this expression exactly as it is, this is our main Pythagorean identity, we could solve for cosine squared theta. We can solve for sine squared theta. And so these would be our other possible alternate forms for those. And so when you're looking at these questions, and you're going to choose all of them that apply, you're checking through all of these sets of values. Okay, so cosine plus sine equals 1 is our main Pythagorean identity, so that works. 1 is equal to secant squared minus tan squared. That one is also a possibility. Cosine squared, when I isolate the cosine squared, it's 1 minus sine squared, also a possibility. Here I'm isolating cosecant squared. The cosecant squared, when I isolate that, is cotangent squared plus 1, cotangent squared minus 1, so that one is not correct. Here, when I have my cosecant and cotangent, bless you, my cosecant minus cotangent squared is equal to 1, so that one here is correct. Sine squared, when I isolate that, is equal to 1 minus cosine squared. That one also works. And then finally, the secant squared, and when I isolate that, here I get 1 plus tan squared. 1 minus tan squared does not work. So in this particular case, there'd be 5 that work, 2 that don't.